three sections of water pipes that have been taken out of the water lines in town. And our public works director brought those into our city manager to show her what we were dealing with. Well, Shannon has held on to those, and anytime we get into a conversation with somebody, we did it with Betsy Emery, and we've done it whenever there's anybody that we're talking to about repairs and fixing. We bring out the visual aids and the sight of those water pipes and explaining to them that this is something that we are using. These were in the ground being used before we broke them out. I mean, these are, they're iron pipes, they're corroded, they're just grungy with rust and corrosion. Interior, they're probably transporting half of the water that they should be just because of the interior is so corroded. Plus the outside is just pitted and full of holes. And it really, I think, has kind of made people pull back and go, whoa, yeah, okay. And for me, it was even a reality because I knew that our pipes were old, but, we go through all of these wonderful things to purify the water and to treat it. And then we run it through these pipes and it's just like, this isn't working, guys. So yeah, visual aid, actually seeing something makes all the difference in the world. So that was my soapbox for the day. I'll go back to my quarter.
And Mayor King, you were about to add something too.
Oh, it just made me think. So we have coming up, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact date, but we're going to be doing pipe flushing. Public Works comes and flushes the pipes of anything that's settled. And something to add to those reservoirs is during that period where we were down to half, we did not have the water to even flush our pipes through town. And so now when we do that yearly or half yearly, I'm like, yay, we have the water to do it. And that should be a bare minimum, but just the fact that we're able to do that, and it makes the water coming out better, the sediment, it's flushed. It's like, it feels like a big accomplishment.
For sure. It's like you actually can do the things you need to do because you have enough water. Yes. So thank you. I'm trying to think if there were things in particular that we saw that were like really stood out. And I know that one of them was that our tour started out in Newburgh. And when we went to their water treatment facility, and they pointed to a spot like halfway through their parking lot where the Willamette River in 1996, because of a giant floods, the 96 floods, had washed away most of the bank and was creeping up towards the water treatment plant, which they've since, over the years, rebuilt and engineered a hillside. But it was a situation where it was like, oh, right, even the most stable seeming water systems have these vulnerabilities that I at least don't know about. And they are hideously expensive for them to deal with. That was the big thing that we saw. Another thing is that in the city of Lafayette, they currently, unlike the city of Amity, which is flush with reservoirs now, that you actually can circulate through multiple reservoirs. The city of Lafayette only has one reservoir. And so their next big project is to purchase and get online a second tank. And reservoir being like a really big tank. And that's primarily because they have to shut down everything when they do the maintenance on their reservoir. And then they're relying upon just that one, which is a real huge problem. So they really, really need that. But the reason why they're able, we talked about this before, but they couldn't do any more building projects and any more subdivisions, houses, new housing in their community, because they simply didn't have enough water. And they had water here and water here and water here, all these sources that were each on their own vulnerable, and then having one water reservoir. But they made a deal with Mac Water and Light. They installed the pipeline to the city of Lafayette boundaries. And now they have a much more stable water supply. And interestingly, they still have those other sources of water. I think is a really good thing. Their next item of business then is to get the second reservoir online but it's allowed them to actually provide housing and make it available for people to build houses in their community. And I was really appreciating that it's not just about your current residents and whether they have enough water.
A quick question. Does Lafayette plan to continue their partnership with Mac Water and Light, or do they have a goal to be self-sustaining?
My understanding is that it's a long-term cooperation and partnership. They're both in, and I think Mayor Watkins, that the city of Carleton is also in it in the Yamhill Water Authority. So I think it's Carleton, Yamhill, or sorry, Carleton, Lafayette, and McMinnville.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly who all is going to end up being in the Regional Water Authority. Right now we're still, I think, discussing a lot of that. And in fact, that's something that we can talk more about later on if you want to, but we've also started some conversations with the folks over in Hillsborough and Wilsonville. Their lines come, right now they're feeding gas up to Gaston. So, and particularly for Yamhill, this is something that's looking kind of interesting, and certainly for us too, rather than having to just be dealing with one water source, or maybe even two. We may have some options that we are learning more about as we go along. We just started those conversations last week, so it's going to take a while to get through on that.
Yeah, so right now you're not in the water authority, is that correct?
I don't, I'm not sure what our status is. I mean, we're buying water from McMinnville right now, of course, while we're doing the project, but it's just a one-time purchase for getting us through this project. After that, we'll just go back to the way that we were before. We'll still be using Panther Creek, and I don't think we'll be accessing any of Mac's water unless, barring a drought or something like that. So I think we're still in discussions with them, but I'm not sure. Excuse me, I'm not sure how far along we are.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, so then Lafayette is the only one who's permanently in it with the city of McMinnville.
Yeah,
and it's interesting. I know that a lot of like the city of Newburgh and the city of Dundee both have water rights on the Willamette, in addition to the water rights that the city of McMinnville purchased. So a lot of folks, and then the city of Wilsonville, and there's a big installation facility, a big facility being installed on the Willamette, I believe in Wilsonville, to pump water on a regional scale out of the Willamette. So there's a lot of Coast Range water with the backup of the Willamette, or Willamette as the main water and Coast Range water as the backup. Yeah.
All the more reason that DTM on the Willamette Basin is important as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What we all need to remember, though, is that it doesn't matter how many sources we have. If we have a drought and there's no water in the mountains, there's no water in the rivers. And that's what worries me. That's what I always am concerned about.
Yeah, that's certainly a real concern. It's nice that with having water sources in the Coast Range, and then having pumping, or having the ability to pump out of the Willamette, one is a snowmelt fed system, and one is a winter rain fed system. So at least in one of those, as Mayor says, you're going to get one of those in many years. It might not be enough, though, is I think what Mayor Watkins is suggesting, right? Yeah. And I think one of the things we can do about it is like what the Yamhill County Public Works is working on with our mercury total maximum daily load, is how can we slow down the water in the winter to reduce soil erosion, right? So soil into the river is mercury into the river. But when you slow down the water in the winter, it also means it goes into the ground, which recharges aquifers, it recharges waterways. And And it's funny, you can even do it on your own. Like on our farm, we could do it and it wouldn't go back into the aquifer that we pump out of for our irrigation or our drinking water, but it would go into somebody's aquifer. So it's like the ultimate in sharing.
Well, and it's funny, you think of that simple water cycle that we, all learned in childhood, but it really plays into the day-to-day lives as we're thinking of thousands of people's drinking water sources.
Oh my goodness, yes. So water, super excited about the next tours. Thank you, Mayor King, for hosting us. It was really good to get people out there. Each one of them will have a different combination of state legislators and congressional staffers, but we'll get everybody there at some point. Like it sounds like Mayor Watkins that Betsy's been to your place, so also good. But I do want to note happily, switching gears to COVID, that case counts continue to go down despite how some of us might feel right now. So that's very, very exciting. And again, the test positivity rate is going down. And I was looking at the email from our county public health, and it's apparently the first time in a very long time that we've had county or weekly case counts below 200. So, if numbers have magical meaning, and they seem to, then we're under 200. It's just very exciting, very exciting. We continue to have people, though, hospitalized, and we continue to have people in our own communities dying of COVID. So this is really still with us. And we're still working on that testing issue. Yes. So any thoughts you want to share with the community about COVID this week?
I'll share. I had the occasion to talk to a couple of the principals in Amity School District, and they're really on top of, if we have a sickness that comes to school, it sounds like they really are all on the same page of what needs to be done and have steps and procedures. And that was really reassuring because that's something brand new. And public health is amazing and is working hard, but we're also leaning on, school administration and community leaders to do some of these jobs and make these choices that really, a couple years ago, they never thought about, let's contact trace contagious diseases. And so just to see a lot of people stepping up into roles that are needed, that's really good.
Agreed. I know. When shortly after I took office, I joined a course that was called County College, which was all the new incoming county commissioners around the state going through a series of like, these are areas that counties work on. And the two that I was like, well, these are really interesting, but I doubt that we'll ever really need them, was knowing all of what you need to do to declare an emergency and what it means for a natural disaster, the coordination that's necessary, how to get reimbursed by FEMA. So, we've done this a lot this year. And then the other one was public health. And I was like, we're the public health authority? Wow. So in this distributed model where OHA, is the funding source and provides the regulations, then each local county is in charge of administering public health. And I thought, well, that's probably just, the vaccines for people who don't have access to a clinic, and maybe some restaurant inspections. And here we are now. So pay attention.
Yeah. One more tip for the community is that if you are looking for rapid tests for purchase and you look online, you will see them sold out anywhere. But it's well worth your time to go into local pharmacies and ask, because they are keeping those in store for people that need them. So if you find yourself in need and you have a person that is able to go into a store, it's worth it to just ask at the pharmacy counter.
That's super helpful, super helpful. Howie.
I have a question about that. The rapid tests would be super helpful for a lot of people in distress. But I heard that you can buy them at the pharmacy, but they can't give you the results. You have to go to your general practitioner to get the result.
So the ones we were able to do is an at-home test. And so it has the antigen agent there and you get your results right in front of your face.
Right.
And from what I have read from multiple sources is if you follow the directions, there's about an 85% accuracy on those.
Thank you, Rachel.
Right, and Howie, that's as opposed to the Abbott Laboratories. I think it's called Binax now, which is the, it's still a laboratory test. It's just a quick turnaround time. But I think part of that is that it requires a machine that Abbott Laboratories builds and sends to you, right?
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. It's clear that we would all benefit from having access to more of the rapid tests. And I mean, in this point, like in February of 2020, I went twice to an urgent care clinic with family members in need of a influenza test. And, they have them right there, just they can run them. And it's basically the same thing. And it feels like there's so much power in knowing that the thing you have is like, what do you have? And then how do you need to treat it? And how do you need to respond? Who do you need to talk to? But not having that knowledge and having to wait a couple of days to get your test done it's a huge barrier. As many of you, or we all probably know at this point, it is a huge barrier. Howie, do you want to talk about, because you had the experience of having folks who thought they needed a test and were challenged by it. What are some of the things that you've seen with testing and the availability of testing, especially for folks who can't just drive to a store or drive to a clinic somewhere?
My experience, not only at Champion Team, but on the path of being out in the elements on a daily basis with our homeless population. The antigen test afterward to know if they had COVID during the experience isn't being given because it's a blood draw. And a number of our houseless neighbors refuse that blood test. So what I see is that we don't know the real numbers of who's had COVID and who has not because of that. Because there's so many people in Yamhill County, over 1,400 counted in 2020 as homeless. I'm unsure whether or not we're reaching to all of the population that is in that contingent to find out whether they've had the vaccines, whether they've been tested recently, whether they've had a quick test or a longer test, found out the results, et cetera, and then masked up when they need to go to the grocery store or get gas or anything like that. So there's a lot of questions that I have about what we're doing for the most vulnerable population that we have in Yamhill County.
Mears, any thoughts on that? Well, Howie, I would say, go ahead.
I was just wondering if anyone's aware of an antibody test that is not a blood draw. It seems like I've heard of a swab test, but I don't have that information.
And as far as I understand, there's antibody tests and then antigen tests. And the antigen test is much more likely to show that you do in fact have had it. It's a higher accuracy in terms of assessing whether at some point you had it and that your body generated an immune response to it. But my understanding is also that the antibody test is a swab based. But Howie, I think that you make a point that you and I say we because I'll give us both of us homework, which is that the point in time count last year was very abbreviated, right? They just went to shelters, emergency housing, but there wasn't the true point in time count where we spread out across the community looking for people and talking to them. And it makes me wonder whether it would be helpful to have some of these questions, even just in a starting line question on the point in time count this next year, because I feel it would be helpful.
I think it would be extraordinarily helpful to have that.
Okay, we should talk about it, or we should both work on the organizers to get that.
I have a question for you, Commissioner. It's regarding Lafayette's new reservoir that they want to build. Does that have to be a pressure vessel, or is there limited pressure due to the fact it's cold water?
It is not a pressure vessel. Yeah. So it's like the, any tank, it's just blown up to a very large size. I think their proposed one is 1 million gallon. So they're squat, they're round. The ones at Amity have a big, thick concrete lid on them.
Right.
Yeah. And they really hold the pressure that they're required to maintain, is just the head pressure of something that might be 17 feet tall.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And they're really neat. So I was the plumber for a community in the North Cascade Mountains of Washington. So I worked on all the water systems there, the drinking water, the toilets, the fire hydrants, fire sprinklers, everything. But one of the things that I didn't work on, we have our own water system there. It's just like any other drinking water system. But there's a guy, and he probably still does it because he loves this, who inspects water tanks, and that's his entire job. And he is completely hairless, as in he shaves his entire body all the time. And then he puts on he soaks himself in Vaseline, and then he puts on a sterilized or like a sanitized wetsuit, and then puts on more Vaseline, and then dives into the tank with his scuba gear and inspects it and writes out his little notes. And I thought, what a niche job. And he's so happy doing it. It makes him giddy to jump into drinking water all the time.
That's funny.
Okay, thank you for putting up with my anecdote. And then I wanted to make sure, before I want to go to mayors to find out what else is happening in the community besides water and COVID. But I wanted to make sure that Howie got some more time to update us on what Encompass at Yamhill is doing, what is happening with the state of homelessness in Yamhill County. How are people doing going into winter?
Well, First Baptist Church will open their low barrier shelter again this winter during the cold snaps. I'm going to be working with Jeff to talk to them about possibly doing a day center. I've been told that possibly Saturdays would work for them, but no other day would work for them other than that, due to other constraints and availability of the building. We're getting ready, Encompass is getting ready for the meeting that you're having on November 2nd. We have defined what we think are the gaps that are happening throughout Yamhill County. We have had a meeting this morning on that subject, and we're working towards your meeting. We certainly don't want to ruffle any feathers. We just want to know what we can do as a nonprofit to assist in the overall scheme of our vulnerable populations. As we all know, it's not just one situation. It's not just the houseless. It's also those with mental health issues, those that are seeking recovery from drugs and alcohol and other possible scenarios, and also those released from incarceration from prison or jail and released back into our communities. So we're hopeful that on that November 2nd meeting that we will be able to get some answers. And we surely appreciate you, Casey, for setting up the meeting, even though it's been rescheduled twice. I have sent out the email to other people on our board of directors so they can also participate on November 2nd as well.
That's great. Thank you, Howie, for being so patient. I know that there are people who this is all still too late for, but we all have to get on the same page.
Yeah.
And decision makers and funders really need to know where the gaps are.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the biggest thing is there's all these programs all around the county, and sometimes they talk to each other and sometimes they're doing their own thing, but there's always gaps, as you know, Howie.
Yes. And a lot of us are siloed, and certainly some of our nonprofits are as well. And we can all work together. It's a better community if we all work together and collaborate, as we all know. So we're so glad to be included.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Sunday sandwiches at the library, 1 to 3 on Sundays. They're also adding hot chili, stews, that type of thing now, as well as the sandwiches and fruit and vegetables and water and other things. So if you have someone that's hungry on a Sunday, send them to the McMinnville Library, Public Library, under the Breezeway, and the UUFM will take really good care of you, as well as a number of volunteers that are not from the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. So we're glad to help support that. Things are going well to some degree at the Safe Overnight Car Camping program. We always have little kerfuffles as we move forward. Again, it's not the perfect scenario, but it is a Band-Aid that allows people to be able to have a place to be rather than sleeping in the elements like so many of our houseless neighbors do. Above and beyond that, I'd like to apologize that my Comcast went down at my last mayor's meeting and I couldn't get online no matter what I did. So the next meeting will be the first Thursday of November, which is the 4th at 1 o'clock. Casey, you're always invited. I know that you have prior commitments on specifically on that day, but if you can ever make it, that would be awesome. Lots of people in the midst of homelessness are really, really in a bad and dire way with all of this COVID extended out as far as it's gone in length of time and duration. So we just have to be more available to them because, again, like Casey said earlier, they can't always come to where the facility is. They have to be gotten to. And so we're working on that as well, even with the Sunday sandwiches, going out into community and dropping off the balance of what we have available to other camps and locations throughout McMinnville and beyond. So we're doing the best we can, but if you know of somebody that is really hurting for food on a Sunday, we can make that happen. So please let me know if you encounter anybody like that.
Awesome, Howie. Thank you very much. And I will say I had a conversation with another person who operates a nonprofit in the county, and they were saying that there are folks who are at risk of homelessness or can't find housing, that not only are the emergency services challenging to navigate and to find and to access, but there are just not enough apartments. Like, just there's not enough apartments for them. So folks who are coming out of situations where they don't have housing, there's not a place to get them in kind of at any cost for many of them. And honestly, Howie, you and I have seen that with long waiting lists for YCAP services, one of the biggest drivers of that long waiting list is that folks who are in motel sheltering projects or in emergency housing, they don't have anywhere to go because there's not the next, we've tapped it out, successfully have tapped out the available apartments. Sorry, you were gonna say something, Howie.
No, I agree with you. Even the housing authority is, backlogged by like 3 to 4 years, over a couple thousand families are waiting for that. So yes, it's like 0.5% in McMinnville that you can find housing of any kind, whether it be a apartment or a house. And with the prices skyrocketing as we speak, even on the rentals, the average studio apartment without a bedroom is around $700 to $750. And if you're working minimum wage and getting 32 hours a week, you can afford the apartment, but you can't afford anything else at all. Nothing. So it's very concerning.
Yes, yes, it is. I will say that our Economic Development Advisory Committee, when they were discussing how to use the pot of money that the county commissioners had set aside for them and specifically to determine or to make recommendations on, housing was one of the things that they wanted to put their economic development money towards, because this group of diverse business owners in the county said that having housing was one of the real big barriers to having a real like thriving economy in a community. And so having like just apartments and studios and townhouses and really simple housing. Sorry, Howie.
No, I totally agree with that. And the other piece of the puzzle is, where do they go? I mean, they could go to Lafayette. Maybe the price might be just a little bit diminished from McMinnville or Newburgh, but barely. Yeah, we need more workforce housing. We need more availability to apartments, low-cost housing, affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big need, and a lot of people commute into Yamhill County from other counties to work here. And so we got to get on top of this somehow.
And mayors will be talking about this on Thursday afternoon. So thank you for that, Howie. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. It needs to be all the different kinds of housing. I talked with a woman at Oregon Housing and Community Services, which is the state housing department agency, and about what we could do with $1 million. Because like $1 million in the scale of housing it's like 4 apartment doors. You can't even buy a lot to build an apartment complex on, for example. You could get a couple of duplexes. You could get 2 duplexes for that, maybe. But she led me through some of the possibilities that are out there. And one of them is that there's it's hard to use, but there's a manufactured home rebuilding, repair, and replacement program that the state monitors, maintains, that we could use some of our funding to get that program started, so that in some of these RV parks and trailer parks, single wide areas, we could actually come in and rebuild these homes for the people who are currently living in them, so that they cost less to operate, keep warm in the winter, for example, and to keep cool in the summer, and that they're then become an asset as opposed to just a liability year after year. Another way of doing it, as she talked about, was to develop a seed, like starting a fund essentially for down payments. So Housing Authority has a program. There aren't a lot of funds in their program for it, but this is for folks who they are paying the same amount in rent right now that they would be if they were paying it on a mortgage, but they have no ability to get a down payment together. So those can be really good ways to do it. Another thing that she described is that both the state and the federal government run what's called a low-income housing tax credit. And for different levels of tax credit for the builder, you have to provide different levels of housing at different price points, essentially, below the median household income in your area. So us putting money towards a project like that could allow like a larger scale apartment complex to be built that otherwise wouldn't make it financially doable. So like $1 million plus the low-income housing tax credit to get an apartment complex built, because the bankers are like, yeah, we can do this because we see that you're doing it. The other one that I learned about was something that's happening on the coast right now, which is that large companies that are based on the coast that need workers in their community, but there's no housing for them, have essentially gone to developers and said, we will rent all of your apartment units. We will just guarantee the rent on them if you build it. And it's a way of getting things jump-started that banks may not want to lend on, because they're like, there's no, in this community, there's no ability for you to just immediately fill all them. And so the company guarantees it. And then the individual employees then take over that rent. So then eventually the company doesn't carry them anymore. So that's a possibility that the county could do a similar thing where we use that money to rent all of the apartments or all the townhomes. So many options out there. And I encourage mayors and Howie to think about what would be the best way to use a limited pot of money that's actually very flexible in how we spend it.
The other piece of that puzzle to me, Casey, is what Doug Rux is doing in Newburgh with the vertical housing thought as well. Because we can all go horizontal, but going vertical beyond 35 feet seems to be a situation where we can't do that. But if we were to change some of the planning possibilities that would allow for more vertical housing, might assist in a lot of ways.
Right. And Amity has, I mean, it's not new now. I still think of it as new because it's less than 5 years old. But you have an apartment complex that wasn't there before. Do you remember how many units it is? I mean, it's a good size for the community.
Honestly, I do not know any. Quite a few. It brought in, I would guess around 40 to 60, honestly.
Wow, that's really significant. I'm just thinking, the smaller communities sometimes have more space than, the city of McMinnville is like, we don't have any bare land at all. So it feels like an opportunity.
A disclaimer, I'm horrible with guesses, so it could be like 20. I gotta put that out there.
And Mayor Watkins, you were working, the city of Carlton, I feel like has some project going on that includes apartments, or is it like small units? Can you remind me?
If you can hear me this time, I remembered. Yeah, in fact, last night at the Planning Commission, we just approved, our planning commissioners approved the site design for Community Home Builders, who is putting in, they're finishing up a sweat equity subdivision, and they had a little patch of ground left, not enough to really do many houses on. So there's a 12-unit development going in there, a mix of townhouses and a couple of smaller single-family homes. So we're really excited about that. It's, it's just nice to see something going in that has the focus of affordability on it. We also just
I think we lost you, Mayor Watkins. We cannot hear you right now.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Well, it said my connection is still unstable, so I'm not guaranteeing it for any length of time here.
We should get some better internet. Somebody should tell the commissioners to get better internet.
I hate to say it, and I don't mean to necessarily blame them, but I didn't have this problem before Ziplease came in and started doing some fiber network stuff. But I don't think it's them, so I just don't know what's going on. Yeah, if we could get the commission to come in and do some broadband work, that'd be really... Anyway, can you still hear me? Yeah, okay. So behind the city hall, anyway, another housing, we sold that property and we've got the developers starting over there. He's going to be putting in, I think, a number of townhomes. I'm not sure how many. he's done one set, but you know, these were 2 years ago. He was selling them for $325 each. So I'm not sure that we can really call that affordable, but it's, you know, it's not 500,000. So, you know, it's doing a little bit better. Both of the subdivisions, the JR Meadows 1 and 2, the JR Meadows 1, which is pretty much built out other than for the apartments, will be putting in a 10-unit apartment building. JR Meadows 2 is going to be putting in, I think it's like 20 or 20 plus apartments over there. Once again, I don't know what those are going to look like or what the cost on them is going to be, but at least they're apartments. So, you know, we've got some stuff getting started, and we've got a planning commission that is pretty committed to affordable housing. So they will be pushing that through, I'm sure. We've got, you know, let's see. Yeah, we did, I think, approve an RFP for, it's 3J is the company that will be coming in and helping us redo our comprehensive plan and our building code. And when they do this, we'll be, obviously, I think there's a lot of community involvement that they're focusing on. Yeah. So, and I know that affordable housing, you know, finding ways to accommodate affordable housing are going to be a big portion of that. So that's what we're doing on that front. And I'll just stop there for now.
That's a lot of stuff.
You know, it's as I'm talking about it, I'm going, yeah, we really do have a lot of things going when we're just kind of planning it. It doesn't seem like that much, but yeah, and for a town this size, it's something quite a bit more than, you know, we had otherwise. So yeah, unless you want me to keep going, but I think that's probably enough for now.
That sounds good. And Howie looks like has a question.
I do. It's so needed, Mayor Watkins, in Carlton and Yamhill, both those apartments. And I'm so glad to hear that the 10 and the 12 units are going to be built and possibly less costly to allow renters to do such. That's really important, especially in your neck of the woods.
Yes, it is. And we, you know, I don't think there's a day that goes by that on our local, you know, Carlton page, we don't have somebody looking for affordable housing. And it's just heartbreaking because we just don't have it right now. You know, we do the best we can, but it's painful. So, well, we wouldn't live in this house if we were trying to buy it right now. I mean, we couldn't do it.
That's the point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mayor King, what would you like to share with your community and with us today too? Beyond water and how many apartment complex, or how many units are in the apartment complex?
I tried to look it up. I still don't know. More than we had before, which I'm thankful for. Quickly, I wanted to tell Howie, thank you. I caught a segment that he did recently about the diaper drive that was done locally. And it was shared that banks, and especially First Federal, is willing to take diapers anytime for a family place, which I found super helpful. I wasn't able to make that time. And so just knowing anytime if someone wants to bring diapers to the bank, they will gladly get them where they're needed. I was happy to hear that. And then for Amity, I wanted to remind everyone we are doing a pumpkin giveaway in the First Federal parking lot this Saturday from 11 to 3. We'll have pumpkins and goodie bags. The library will be out handing out some goodies as well. So we'd love to see people from the community come through. And then also we still have our open council position. So if anyone's interested in joining us, we would love to get a full council.
And Mayor,
and then,
Is there
Yeah.
is there a deadline by which somebody needs to? Are you planning to appoint somebody at a certain time? Do you have your own timeline?
So Amity has quite a hard time getting volunteers. We really do. And so we would just love anyone to apply that's willing to make the commitment and wants to learn. You know, you don't need a lot of experience, just an ability to come to the meetings with an open mind and learn and want to help your community. So it's really open until filled. And I hope that we get a lot of applications and we're, you know, choosing. But yeah, it will be open until it's filled at this point.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm sorry, you were saying more though, and I interrupted you with
Oh,
that question.
Just something I keep forgetting to bring up, but the council approved new design standards for Amity. Public Works, along with many others, updated that. And so just a reminder, if you're thinking of building or developing in Amity, go ahead and make sure you're looking at our new development standards, which are available online and at City Hall.
Sweet, that's a good reminder. I wanted to go. Mayor Watkins and we had traded back and forth the broadband issue, and we do have a little bit of an update, and that is that we sent out the request for information. We said, hey, internet service providers, give us information on where the needs are in Yamhill County that you think, and what are your plans to fulfill those needs to like get people good internet in here. And we had 4 internet service providers who submitted information to us, which will form the basis for our own then request for proposals with the limited amount of money that we have. And it turns out that all 4 had plans that were much, much more than we have funding for. Not a surprise. However, so the next move then will be to use those as the basis for putting out a request for proposals that we'll see hopefully by the 1st of November. The tricky thing is that these are all publicly available documents because they've gone to the county, but one of the internet service providers stamped confidential trade secrets all over theirs. So we just need to figure out how to respect their submissions that are now public records and still get this thing out to the world, because it's really important for people in the community that they're not delayed in our getting money out to them and building good internet because one party has trade secrets.
Is it proprietary?
Apparently. I haven't seen them because I'm not allowed. But we'll see. So hopefully that comes out soon and then we're not delayed too much. It may just be a matter of that this particular provider, if they really are so closely holding on to their own information, it may be that we need to send it back to them and say, this isn't, you can respond to the request for proposals, but we're not going to hold on to this and use it for an RFP. So I just thought it was really interesting. I thought it would help you with understanding the delays that we have, because our county council is trying to figure out how to do this. But more to come. We will have good internet here. We will. And I learned recently that there is money coming to some communities where that's set aside as part of the infrastructure plan for some communities in the county. And that is very exciting. And it'll form the basis for doing a lot of good infrastructure work. So cross your fingers that it gets passed someday. Is there anything else that the community needs to know or the folks here on the call? Okay, well, I will say that Yamhill County, which was subject to both the teacher and the healthcare worker mandate, made it through Monday and into Tuesday, Monday being the deadline. And the folks who were subject to the mandate, I think about 6% of the 380-ish were applied for and received accommodations through an exemption process. And then the vast majority of the rest provided proof of vaccination. And then there's some folks that the county's still working with. But I want to say that from my perspective, huge gratitude goes to our county administrator and human resources and our county council and all of the unions that were involved, because our union leadership worked ongoing basis, day to day, person to person, to make sure that everybody who was subject had some status that allowed them to keep their job or to figure out what to do next. So huge lift that we just got through. Okay, well, with that, we will see you next week, but I will also see all of you in various settings over the next week ahead. So thank you very much for your service to the community.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.